you hear me? Good afternoon, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Anton Liv, and I'm humbled and inspired to stand here on this scene today. We are trying to connect with Mr. Julian at NATO HQ. Unfortunately, he was stuck at Brussels airport due to ongoing situation there. But we will hopefully start the seminar with a longer speech or some statements from NATO HQ and Julian. After that, we will bring the panel of excellence to the scene and continue the dialogue on stage. Great. Julian, can you read me?
Yes, I can. Hello.
There we go. Loud and clear. Energy is everything and is everywhere. When dies, you realize how important energy is for you and the society. Today we will skip the micromanagement and look at the broader picture. When Ukraine faced the war, the full-time aggression from Russia, they faced multiple challenges. And when the Ukraine power supply became a target, they have quite big challenges to manage. Manage how to protect, maintain and conduct the grid during an ongoing war. And then how to resupply and secure the energy supply and also restore and build it even stronger for the future. Today we will give you different perspectives, from the NATO perspective to the agency, to the political perspectives and the organizations within the sector. With that said, Julian, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Anton, and thank you very much for OX2 for the invite. And good afternoon to everyone. Indeed, I'm stuck in Brussels due to logistics, so apologies for that. I was asked to give you a little bit of an overview of how we see things at NATO HQ, and indeed, your meeting today coincides with the NATO summit in The Hague that is just starting. And the summit will have three major priorities: so a more lethal NATO, more defense production, and obviously Ukraine, which is the topic of our conversation today. And at NATO HQ, we look at what the Russians are trying to achieve in Ukraine in the energy domain with a very, close eye, for various reasons, to try to understand what they would do to us, to try to understand how and why Ukraine is prevailing, and to extrapolate some lessons for allies. And I'll try to give you a little sneak peek of that. I'll start by saying a couple of words on the big picture, and then zoom in on everything that happened after March 2024, and I'll explain why. So let's start with the big picture. Three observations. The first one, why are the Russians trying to destroy the power system in Ukraine? The answer is very simple: to win the war, to break the morale, to lead to a collapse of the economy. If you imagine for 1 second that you live in Kiev, and you imagine that you live in an apartment block, say on the 6th floor, if you have a blackout, your lift is not working. You mentioned, Anton, your phone, but a simple thing, the lift is not working. If you have kids, well, you walk for the stairway 6 floors every day. And I'm clement with the 6 floors. It can be 10, it can be 15. You have no light, your fridge is not working, and God forbid you're heating with electricity, or you're preparing your food with electricity. You basically live in a cave. That's what the Russians tried to do. But Ukraine was incredibly resilient against that, and there are a number of reasons behind. And the first one is the fact that, to cut the long story short, the power system of Ukraine was built and designed during the Soviet Union to withstand a war against NATO. Why so? Because Ukraine was the economic engine of the Soviet Union. You had a lot of steel production, you had a lot of weapon production happening in the Ukrainian Soviet Republic. So the Soviet engineers included a lot of resilience by design. I'll just give you one number. Ukraine had 26 gigawatts of power generation versus more than 50 gigawatts of power transmission. So the grid included a lot of redundancies. We don't have that level of resilience in Europe. In fact, our grids are underinvested. Our grid in some countries struggle to accommodate the impact of the energy transition, let alone the arrival of data centers, AI, and quantum computers. So that's the second point, the second observation that I have. Also, what's important to note when we think of the Ukrainian resilience is the fact that keep in mind that Ukraine is a candidate country to join the EU. And in 2021, the Commission had talks with the government of Ukraine with a simple plea. Could you please unbundle your energy system? Could you please stop employing internally in your companies technicians? Could you please outsource that so you're fit with our rules? Ukraine made a very educated decision not to do it, and the grid operator, Ukrenergo, today employs 6,000 technicians. In Europe, we outsource that. Our companies, they don't have that manpower capacity. So another reason why, unfortunately, we are less resilient in Europe than Ukraine is. And finally, third observation, very simple, centralization. Centralization implies that you put a huge target on your back in the event of a war. And as demonstrated in Ukraine, in the event of a war with NATO, Russia would go after the infrastructure, the energy infrastructure on day one. And what I mean by centralization is not only power production, but also power distribution. Because people usually like to think, okay, surely centralization implies huge nuclear power plants or huge conventional power plants. And renewables are decentralized. And they will never be attacked. Yes, but there are two caveats. First of all, if all the power from a wind park or a photovoltaic park is centralized in one transformer before being exported further to the electricity grid, it puts a target on its back. And what we also unfortunately see in Ukraine, that's a new trend along the front lines, Russia is employing FPV drones, so very cheap drones to attack individual windmills going after the generators. So they invest a couple of $100 and they create damage for sometimes going into hundreds of thousands or millions. Now, what's happened since March, and why do I want to zoom in on that for a moment? Basically, up until March 2024, Russia was mostly attacking the power grid. It was trying to slice down the country, slice down the connection between the power generation centers and the consumers by destroying the grid. And that worked to some degree, but in March 2024, Russia started to attack the power plants directly. And you might ask, why didn't they do it beforehand? And the answer is incredibly simple. Beforehand, if a Russian ballistic or cruise missile would land on an object of the size of a football stadium, it would be a great targeted strike, and the operators on the Russian side would be extremely happy. Today, a Russian cruise missile will fly through if you have a window in the stand, through the window and land at Anton. That's how precise their weaponry got, and they're producing. Just last winter, Ukraine's power system was under a huge struggle. Basically, the Russians managed to destroy 9 gigawatts of power generation, which is absolutely huge. But Ukraine persevered for 3 main reasons. When we look solely the energy side of the equation and not the military side. The first one was weather. Weather was already clement. It was a fairly mild winter in Ukraine. Cold snaps happened, but they were fairly short, 2 to 3 days, which reduced the demand for energy, be it electricity and heating, by roughly 2 gigawatts. That's quite a bit. Repairs. Ukraine was able to repair a lot of what was damaged. 4.5 gigawatts was repaired. I mentioned the technicians that they employed locally, and they kept. And finally, mobile gas turbines really helped to preserve the system when it was under stress. Ukraine deployed roughly 1 gigawatt of small gas-fired unit. These units were often deployed on chassis, so they were mobile. They were able to transport them from one part of Ukraine under stress to another, and that really provided Ukraine with a lot of flexibility, and it's reflected in the numbers. Before this winter, coal generation accounted for 8% of electricity produced in Ukraine. Today it's 16%, so it's doubled. Solar panels, they helped, yes, especially individuals, produce electricity in isolation from the main power grid, but they were not the game changer. The game changer when it comes to power production in Ukraine, at least, over this winter, were these mobile gas turbines. And I will end here, Anton, and I'll be pending for some questions if there are any.
Thank you very much, Julian. May I ask you, how do you see the relation between civilian and military perspectives, and how military equipment supposed or helped critical infrastructure?
Look, at NATO HQ, we keep on gathering names in Ukraine to discuss about these problems, and the message that always comes out of that is very simple. There is no better way to protect critical energy infrastructure in Ukraine than providing Ukraine with a sufficient number of defense systems, but also planes. Why? Because Ukraine successfully uses planes, fighter jets, to intercept incoming cruise and ballistic missiles. At NATO, we also try to support Ukraine through the deliveries of non-lethal equipment. So what we do, we supply them with electronic warfare systems, so systems that jam incoming drones. And there's a lot of drones coming. Just to give you one figure, a year ago, the difference between the percentage increase between the number of drones launched by Russia at Ukraine increased by 1,000% over the last 12 months, which is an insane number. One of the most effective ways of taking them down is by deploying electronic warfare, which Ukraine does successfully. But we also supply Ukraine with fuel, and more specifically with aviation fuel, to enable the sorties of the aircraft that they mentioned that Ukraine uses offensively to protect its skies against the incoming targets.
Right, and as a final comment, how would you recommend to comment the Nordic-Baltic area to reflect on the ongoing war and what to bring within our countries, what to focus upon?
I think that we should really focus about resilience. Resilience is the first line of defense. Basically, the more resilient you are, you deter aggression. And there is a lot of things that can be done. Let me go back to the summit in The Hague. Allies will agree to spend 5% of their GDP on defense, but 1.5% of that figure will go to issues related to enhancing resilience. And here again, Ukraine teaches us a lot of lessons. I've mentioned that we should try to avoid leading to situations in which our power mix has too much concentration. We should go for redundancies. Ukraine also successfully employed some passive measures to protect some elements of its infrastructure, which help to protect, for instance, substations and transformers from incoming drones. So there's a lot that we can learn. And finally, I can also say that the defense industry and the private industry should work in hand. On one hand side, to ensure that our installations are resilient, but on the other hand side also to ensure that they do not go into the way of the military in the sense that they are able to deliver their mission effectively, but also even, and that's possible with technology, that they can actually facilitate the mission of the military, which is to protect our common space.
Right. Thank you very much, Julian, and we give him a warm hand. With that, I would like to invite the panelists to the scene. We do have Stefan Wallin, today Senior Advisor, Public Affairs, former Member of the Parliament and 20 years in politics in Finland, among others, former Minister of Defense. Please take your seat. Anna Nyman, today Deputy Head of the Department at MSB for Civil Preparedness and Civil Defense. Welcome. And from the industry, we have from E.ON, Peter Singenstam, Director Operations and Energy Systems from E.ON. And finally, from OX2, Emily Zachrisson, Country Manager of Sweden. Please. So, Stefan, what's your reflections, your key perspectives on the speech from Julian, from your political view?
Yeah, thank you very much. I can feel the smell of some kind of burning gasoline or something. It's a sign, I guess. Well, it was interesting to hear from Julian. Maybe the first takeaway was that it was very nice to hear that Ukraine has recovered so well from all these nasty attacks against its energy infrastructure. Because when you follow the news and you follow look at the pictures of these cruel attacks, you get the impression that now Ukraine is really paralyzed by these attacks, because without energy, with or without elevator, and so forth, as Julian told us, you're quite bad shape. But thanks to the level of protection of its energy system, and thanks to the 6,000 technicians, I guess, and also the mobile gas turbines, Ukraine has recovered well, and it seems like the Russians have kind of given up its ambitions to destroy the Ukrainian energy infrastructure, because they know that the Ukrainians have the tools to build it up again and to protect it very well. As a Finn, of course, we have our experiences from living next door to the Russian bear and trying to stand the smell from its mouth. But we were also, once upon a time, and not too many years ago, quite dependent on Russian energy. In the 1980s, we imported a lot of natural gas, oil. We still import uranium for our two Russian-built nuclear reactors, the ones in the city of Lovisa. But in other respects, we are quite independent now as far as the Russian supply is concerned. So when you live next door to an aggressive neighbor, you have to be prepared, and you have to prepare for the worst. So glad to hear that Ukraine has managed so well after all.
Thank you. Prepare for the worst. What's your reflections, Anna, and the perspectives of MSP?
Yes, well, thank you for inviting me. I think we're all aware of that Russia's war against Ukraine is not only a threat to Ukraine, but it's a threat to the whole of Europe as well. And the MSB has a mission in Ukraine to support the Ukrainian civil defense. And the top priority of that mission is to support the electricity sector, because we see that if the electricity sector is affected, you easily affect the whole of society. And by affecting the whole of society and the targeted attacks that Russia has on Ukraine and that sector, is that we see that affects everyday life in Ukraine, as we heard, Julian said. Not only the elevators, but the hospitals and the schools, and therefore also the resilience of the Ukrainian people and the will to defend. So that is a really important lesson that we learn from Ukraine, that we need to keep society going, and therefore electricity is the top priority to maintain during that kind of situation.
From politics to agency and then to operations, the responsible or the supplier of energy for each one of us. Eon, what's your perspective?
Yes, we try to keep the lights on, also in Sweden, even though sometimes it blows. But reflecting on the Ukrainian situation in here, I think what first comes to mind is really that that is not a scenario, that is reality happening, and to learn from the reality is so much more stronger. I was actually in the springtime meeting up with 3 DSOs from western part of Ukraine, and it's really lessons to be learned for how they operate the distribution grids in this kind of situation. On one hand, it is really a war happening, but on the other hand, it's also daily life ongoing. And just the fact on only to get how do you get the economy working in society, but also in distribution businesses, for example. Yeah, you need to have cash flows, you need to be getting cash in here. And that was one thing which was astonishing me, is that the Ukrainians, they were paying their energy bills, although the war is ongoing, life is ongoing, and also that actually the western part of Ukraine, the energy grid, is expanding now because the eastern part has moved to the western part. So they need to expand the grid. So on one hand, it is daily operations. On one hand, it's also protecting themselves for attacks happening every day. And to having that in mind, I think that is what we need to bring along here also in Western Europe, in our countries, how we actually try to make our plans as real as possible, and to then have the plans not as a silo, but actually have them close to the operations that we run every day. Otherwise, it will be only plans.
Right, thank you. And from your perspective, Emily, how to add on? What's your spontaneous and reflections for you?
Well, a few reflections is that energy policy and security policy, they're not two different things. They're the same, and in Sweden we should actually learn from what's happening in Ukraine and make them to the same, or not the same, but at least combine them. How are these two interrelated in building a strong total defense, and what do the different players like Eon or OX2 play? What role do we play in that? We talk a lot about self-sufficiency within the electrical system, but we also import fuels to our Swedish industry, and how do we see that we will be doing that in a future situation? That's one thing. The other part is also the decentralized production has proven to be quite important to the Ukrainian system, along with having a super strong transmission grid, which we also have in Sweden and can benefit from, and how the different technologies actually can complement each other. So during the war, Ukraine has continued to construct wind farms, which I think is quite astonishing, despite the war ongoing. They've been building solar power. They've also benefited from their biogas production and small-scale hydropower. We have all of that in Sweden, and we have all these opportunities, but we kind of lack the ambition to build upon them in building this energy and security policy together.
Great, thank you very much. From an OX2 and Eon perspective, from a bottom down and bottom top perspective, what are the key actions from the industry to maintain or conduct, and what's the main questions, the needs from politics and agencies?
I think main actions, what we are working on is of course currently building all the resilient plans. So we have refreshed them during the years now and getting them in place and getting the organization in place, I would say. And then what we are also doing is having much more planning together with authorities. But what we see is still missing is really the roles in such a resilience or attack situation scenario. How are we working really? So that is one part which I think is under development, will come more, but it's still very much unclear, I would say, from bottom-up industry perspective. And then I think also what is missing still, but I know it's also worked on, how do we create a cooperation also in a financial manner between authorities and companies being part of the civil defense, because we may need to make a step up in our defense activities, and parts of that is when you're a grid company, parts of that is what you should be doing, but then there are also levels where we need to get certain financing for that kind of a threat situation which we do not have. So I think that is important parts which we are requesting more on.
Right. So current, the future operation, the roles and mandates, and the financing. Any additional topics?
And I think to add to that, to integrate energy and defense planning. We don't do that. We work as two separate interest areas in Sweden, and I think those will benefit from becoming
Right. Thank you.
joint.
Should we give the word to Anna? What's your reflections or comments related to the rules and mandate and who are in lead?
I'm very happy to hear the responses because that's exactly what we need. We need to cooperate through public and private in Sweden. And I think the message from our politicians is really clear that we need to take action and then start or heighten the alerts and really start planning for the worst case scenario. And gladly, MSB got a new task the other day to coordinate the security of supply in Sweden through, of course, the different sectors that we have in Sweden. But I think that is a clear message to start building structures where we could start the actual planning with the public and the private sectors. In all sectors, also energy and defense. So I think that we have a lot coming, and there's a lot going on.
Right, we have, thank you. And from your perspective, Stefan, the financing model, how to make things working, and you need to finance the models.
Well, I think I will continue from where Anna ended, because I think the private-public partnership, public-private third sector partnership is very important, and it also goes for the model of security of supply. And I think a functioning model of security of supply is based on a model where the private sector, the public sector, and the third sector participate cross-cutting as equal partners, with no political fences or ideological obstacles, because the private sector is needed if you want to have the chain, if you want the chain to work. And it's about very practical issues. It's about production of goods, distribution, delivery, that will say, storage of goods, cool chains, whatever you need for just to make your everyday life working, if the crisis or the war is there. And then, of course, the state is needed when it comes to security, storage, stockpiles of things like coal or oil, crude oil, also other goods, medicines and so forth. But you have to drop all the political and ideological obstacles if you want the chain to work when the Pelican hits the fan.
Could you see in Finland or other countries that you have stockpiles or huge stockpiles for some raw materials or other requirements within the sector?
Well, in the Finnish model for security of supply, the Center for Security of Supply in Finland, the NESA has these kind of stockpiles. For instance, oil stored for 6 months of national consumption. Also grain and other things. And these are no state securities, state secrets, these are public information.
Right, and both of you, OX2 and E.ON, you have operations in different countries in the neighborhood. Do you have any role models from other countries that Sweden or Finland should learn from, except from the lessons in Ukraine?
Actually, I think Finland is one of the role models in at least Nordic countries, as Stefan has outlined in here. They have taken the civil defense part serious for a long time. And I think compared to maybe Central European countries as well, there has been a little bit of slowdown on the civil defense, and now we need to ramp up in all sectors. And what I feel also from the European colleagues is that Sweden is quite heading up in here. We are taking it serious from a political level into the industries, and we try to really to step up the game now. So I think we are on a good way, but maybe Finland is to learn from, and of course to look into Ukraine and get the learnings really from them, and not working with theoretical scenarios.
Yeah, we're quite active in Finland and see Finland actually as a forerunner in a lot of these areas right now, both in the political system and where they want to drive the country, and that also filters down to all of these different parts of planning the different industries on how to make things work even in crisis, but also where do you want to take us in the market economy, because that's the business we live off every day.
And the add on, Stefan?
Thank you, very flattering to hear you about Finland, but of course we have had our reasons why we have this model in place, functioning model in place, where the private sector, the public sector, the third sector works as equal partners. And this reason has 4 figures: 1342. That's the number of kilometers of Russian border, Finnish-Russian border. That's the reason.
Do you have any comments, Anna? How do you look at different countries? You have your lessons learned from Ukraine, but you also have a great cooperation with many other countries.
Yeah, and I'd say that we look at Finland as our blueprint for the development of security of supply. We have cooperation with Finland and also common planning on its way. So hopefully, I think that in a couple of years we'll be able to welcome Finland and Finns to look at the Swedish way to do it. I think that's our goal.
But we haven't mentioned it such clear, but the importance of nuclear power is a main source in Ukraine. What's your perspectives on the nuclear power and the role of it, how to protect, maintain and develop and combine within centralized or decentralized grid?
Well, I don't have any comments on the nuclear, but the lesson from Ukraine that multiple sources of energy is important. You have to be redundant in that way. So redundancy and multiple sources, I would say, is important for the security.
Right, and as a former Minister of Defense, how to protect and develop a nuclear power plant during wartime?
Well, also as a former Minister for the Environment, I'm a big fan of nuclear power because it's a climate-smart way of producing energy. But I'm also a friend of renewables. And just like Anna said, you should have many different kinds of ways of producing energy in your palette. Hydropower and wind power, solar power and so forth. So if I were in politics today, I would strongly advocate the renewables and nuclear power.
That's one key insight mentioned in many reports, to have a decentralized or a mix. Do you have any clear actions within E.ON or OX2 how to develop the mix of suppliers and sources?
I mean, OX2, we work with renewable energy sources. We know they're scalable, we know they're fast to build, and that's what we build our business on. But we still believe we need an energy system that has different sources. That's how we build a strong system. If we're talking about our total defense capabilities or about the power price we pay in the end. So I think we need that mix of sources to have a strong system. In Sweden, we, however, get stuck in discussing technologies, and we stop thinking about what functions do we want from the system. And I think we would benefit if we could just unite around what functions are we looking to design for, and then design for that, rather than getting stuck in if it's one or the other, because we need all of the sources.
Yeah, and we as E.ON, we are not building the production or generation sources. We are rather building the grids and energy solutions for Europe in here. We are investing 43 billion euros between 2024 and 2028 across Europe. Thereof 35 billion goes into grids. And in Sweden we are investing heavily, about 7-8 billion Swedish crowns per annum. And of course this is building both resilience and autonomy as well. By that if we are getting more and more energy production in Sweden, which is also distributed, that means that we can become more resilient. We are really going towards that. And what we try to do is to build a system which we can operate in a much more distributed manner as well. So I think that is what we are contributing with.
We highlighted several different topics, areas, from the organization perspective up to NATO perspectives. Are there any questions we haven't touched upon that you would like to give your perspectives upon?
We haven't touched upon cyber threats. We talked a lot about physical threats, and I think that's an area that's going to be a lot more important going forward, and maybe hybrid warfare ongoing that we need to prepare for every day, not just in a war situation, but in the situation we are in as of today. So I'm interested to hear if the other panelists have anything.
We have the diversity with independence, since Finland is a front state and Sweden, instance, is a rear state. And that implies that we do not have Russian troops at Visby, for example. We might have the conflict, the problems as we have today, gray zone problems, but in a larger scale. So that's one thing to prepare upon.
Maybe one comment is that we, on one hand, we see it's daily operations, daily business happen, but this is also containing, we are not in a peaceful environment. We are in the gray zone actually, and definitely talking about cybersecurity, there we see attacks all the time, of course on our systems as well. So that is happening, and we see also incidents happen on our grids in a systematic manner. So it's reality around what we are talking about in here actually. So that is what I would like to emphasize.
Anna, may I ask you, how do you see the balance in between proactive measures and more reactive capabilities? How to prioritize, or what's your point of it?
I think we need to do stuff now because things are happening now. But we also need to find a balance between looking and planning ahead and doing things now. So that's not a really good answer, I realize, but we have to be able to do both things.
And if you look at E.ON OX2, for instance, what to prioritize right here and right now?
The thing to start with, I think, is being aware of the situation, the security situation, and you are both aware of that. But also have your contingency plans done, plan for your workforce, and also a plan B. That would last a long way, I think.
Right.
To start with that.
Stefan?
Yeah, I think we talking about cyber and hybrid threats. I think the most nasty thing here is that the trolls, or those who are practicing cyber attacks and hybrid attacks against us, they're using our wonderful open society, trying to turn its strong parts to weaknesses. I think we can never protect well enough, but we can do our best. So we must be prepared, and I think also our security authorities, our intelligence services, has warned us for that the Russians are trying to practice sabotage against our. It could be water towers, it could be telemasts, it could be windmills, wind power plants, and so forth. So what we can do is to protect them and us, and also to be aware, to be alert, because the trolls, they're not everywhere, but they are in many places.
Great, thank you. If we try to summarize this panel and the speech from Mr. Julian at NATO HQ, what's your final insight and your final call to action? Is there one call to action that you would like to give the audience and the colleagues at the stage? Should we start with Stefan?
Well, yes, maybe I will continue where I just stopped. We shall always protect our open Nordic welfare society, our openness, our principles of openness and transparency. But we shall not be naive and not be blue-eyed, because everybody doesn't want us well. So don't stop living, but protect yourself and protect your society and protect our critical infrastructure.
Thank you. Anna?
Yes, to dwell on that, as Julian said, resilience is deterrence, and I think that's really important. This resilience is our first line of defense, and that you easily can start with doing by continuously planning and being aware of the threat and security issue right now. So deterrence, resilience.
Secure your plan B, even
Yes.
if you're a single person, you're a small, medium enterprise, or you're a global company.
Yes.
Please do. Right. Head over to Anna. Oh, sorry, Emily at OX2.
Well, I think we need to continue to invest in our grid, because that will be the backbone independent. So sure that Peter can continue to have a strong grid to support us. The other is that we continue to speak about these matters across borders and across different agencies and different actors in the industry. So I would encourage all of you in the audience to take an initiative to host some of those talks.
It's really good. Triple helix is not a word. It's persons on a stage, or persons in a meeting, or persons in a corporation. Great. Peter?
I fully subscribe to that as well. Really good. Maybe the last one then, it is that to combine really the operations, daily operations, with the planning. So making it a reality, making what is happening around us a reality, and ensure that what we are building up in civil defense will work also in a bigger scale.
Great, thank you. With that said, a warm applause for the panelists. Right, so start working, have a plan B, and connect with those people and the people around you. I'm not a rude person, but unfortunately I have to ask each and everyone to, as fast as possible, move out of the garden. If you have a ticket to the mingle, then you're welcome back.